The running backs going early. Bijan Robinson, number 8 to Atlanta, and then Jahmyr Gibbs going to the Lions, number 12, before they traded Swift. Are you surprised that trend kind of rebirthed? And also, from a fantasy perspective, are you seeing like a Bijan Robinson first-round grade on him like you saw with Saquon and Trent Richardson and a couple other guys?
Let's start with Bijan because I predicted that one and I wasn't shocked at all. I felt like that was good for the last 3 months of the draft. It just seemed after finishing second in running back carries per game, only behind the Cowboys, that was the direction the Falcons were going to go. Also added Matthew Bergeron on the offensive line to go along with Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom, bringing those players back on long-term deals and fortifying what finished as the highest run play rate under Arthur Smith in the league last year from neutral game strip. That's what they want to do. That's what they do best. Not only that, but if you look at Bijan's box scores on the surface, I understand receiving anyways doesn't pop too much, but still he's quietly averaged the 4th most red zone targets among all running backs since 2021 in the nation. So when it matters most, teams and coaches like Steve Sarkisian did most likely will just feed him. And so I think that's what's going to happen. I have Bijan Robinson ranked as my RB3 overall. Right now in Underdog, he's going as the RB2 around the 7th pick. And I know that may seem rich, but just given the dream scenario, as I mentioned earlier, this offense and how they scheme plays that he falls into, it is genuinely the perfect situation for him as a rookie. And that's why he should unanimously be a top 5 player and my number 3 running back right behind Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. For Jahmyr Gibbs, though, I thought it was quite shocking because on one hand, it was poor team building. Like, just step back and think that they gave David Montgomery a 3-year, $18 million contract. And they gave David Montgomery more money than Jamal Williams, who just recorded 1,000 yards and a league-high 17 rushing touchdowns for them, than Williams received with the Saints. And so they already wanted Montgomery. But then to pay that money and then to sink the number 12 overall pick into Jahmyr Gibbs just seems ludicrous. And so I would imagine they have a plan for him. Right now, I have him projected for the 4th most catches among all running backs in the league, right behind Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, and Ramondre Stevenson. But beyond that, besides being poor team building, it's just the fact that, yes, he has to get there through touchdowns as primarily a receiving back. And so it makes me a little bit skeptical in year one, given that David Montgomery is the kind of dirty grinder guy that does have 4 consecutive seasons of 1,000+ yards from scrimmage that will probably lead the team in touches over Gibbs.
So a running back and a wide receiver that scored a lot last year that you're more down on this year.
I already mentioned Saquon Barkley. Travis Etienne is the one I'm fading. How about that? I have him outside the top 12 running backs right now. And because he's proven that he can't earn targets in the NFL. Just to handle, without James Robinson from week 8 on, whenever they traded him last year, just to handle 85% of the team's backfield touches and finish from that point forward with the 11th most routes among all running backs. Etienne still recorded more than 3 targets in only 1 of those last 12 games and reached a double-digit target share in only 1 of those last 12 games. Doug Peterson has also come out this offseason and mentioned that Jamichael Hasty, not only Jamichael Hasty, but they signed Dearness Johnson and they drafted Tank Bigsby with important day 2 capital. Bigsby, by the way, who led his team in rushing Auburn in every season since 2020 and the SEC. Not only that as a workhorse, but he has a career 15.4% target share in college, which proves he can earn targets, which Etienne has proven he cannot. Thus, I think a lot of these important roles for fantasy, whether it's inside the 10-yard line or in the passing game, are getting stripped away because of Hasty and Bigsby. Thus, Etienne seems like a player who everyone's going to rank as a low-end RB1, and really he just can't get there because his opportunity and his ceiling is not there as perceived. And so he's one I'm really down on this year. The other one I think is quite obvious is Davante Adams, given that we don't understand what's going on with Jimmy Garoppolo's injury. And even then, Jimmy Garoppolo's rate of throws and completion rate 20 yards deep has been lower the last 3 years than Derek Carr's. And that's important because Davante Adams last year led the league in touchdowns and receiving yards on targets 20 yards deep. And so I question where his ceiling goes now with either Garoppolo or Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Connell. It can't be good. So I think that's a player I'm bumping down to become a low-end tight end 1, despite being the only receiver last year to record at least 30% of his team's targets. Maybe that's a scheme thing under Josh McDaniels, but at the same time, we now all have to question if those targets are inaccurate and thus useless.